And we're live. It is Friday, January 10th, 2025, the year of our Lord. It is 8 o'clock a.m. and you are watching Dog Shirt TV. And it is a goddamn revolution in morning television. Guys, we're not allowed to have fun anymore, and the days that it's getting less fun by the day. But I have a really good news for you today. At 10 a.m., not a week, or just barely a week before he will assume the presidency of the United States and begin the voracious campaign of annexations that will start with Alicia herself. And, you know, we're going to move up the up north. We're going to gobble up Canada. We're going to go for Greenland. We're going to take the canal zone. You know, it's going to begin 10 days from now. But before that, at 10 a.m. this morning, Donald Trump will be sentenced in criminal court in New York for 34 felonies. And we know what sentence he's going to get, which is to say unconditional discharge, which, by the way, unconditional discharge sounds a little bit like a medical thing, you know, like an oozing wound. But he will get his unconditional discharge today at 10 o'clock, including, I think, some cool choice words from Justice Juan Merchan, who is a man of few words. And so I'm just going to say, take a break from your doom scrolling. Take a break from your prognostications of the end of the world or the end of the sovereignty of your country, whatever. And by the way, I have a very important announcement regarding the end of sovereignty of other countries. We have found the one Greenlander who actually does want to be annexed by the United States. And he has agreed to come on the show and talk about why he wants to be annexed by the United States. All that is to come at 10 o'clock this morning, which is a scant 1 hour and 57 minutes from now. Pause a moment to enjoy the sentencing of Donald Trump. Alicia Wanless, former hockey fan, not sleeping, doom scrolling constantly. How's stuff?
I didn't say I was doom scrolling. I can do enough in my own head.
So this is auto doom scrolling. Is that a thing you can doom scroll without even scrolling?
I think it was invented before doom scrolling was a thing, which is to say that an anxious person can run endless scenarios if they're creative enough through their head without any help from external factors.
So, all right, let's talk about this. Is anxiety a form of creativity? Like,
I'm not
if you're
sure.
a completely non-creative person and you're anxious,
it'll be boring.
What do you doom scroll in your head about?
I think that creativity and anxiety are two separate things, but when combined can be fun and horrifying.
So what is you're saying that like a non-creative anxious person, just like the world's going to end, meteor, but a creative anxious person, it's like a florid movie.
Well, maybe not a florid movie, but your options for scenarios are maybe more numerous and inventive.
That would be so terrible to be a person with high anxiety and low creativity. You get all the stress and none of the amusement.
I think, well, yeah, right. I mean, I don't, I think that having anxiety at the best of times probably isn't the most fun. It just sometimes enables some people to be higher achievers.
All right, well, help me out with this. And by the way, I think we may have nobody on the show today watching live because I think everybody may have clicked on the wrong.
Well, I was wondering that because I can't see a chat.
Yeah, I think there's no chat today because, like, nobody is here because nobody reads the scheduling announcements, which, yeah, you read them. Well done. I did text it to you, though, on
I
a
got an
kind of
email. I got an email from an account that seemed a little sketchy.
Riverside.
No, it's an anonymous Apple email
Oh,
thing.
yeah, that's my Apple alias. But yeah, so I think nobody's here. It's just like you and I having a cool phone conversation. And
Which
actually, that means the lie that I lied when I said, "And you are watching Dog Shirt TV, a goddamn revolution in morning television." That was nobody addressed to because you're not watching. You're participating in.
I was watching that though.
I guess. All right, so I wasn't lying. Um,
Are you lying if you didn't know it was the truth? It
No,
wasn't the truth?
no,
I mean, that's just
you
misinformation. Are we
can't
going
lie
down this
by,
definitional
you
rabbit
can't
hole
lie
again?
by accident. Lying is an intentional activity.
Exactly.
All right.
Therefore,
Therefore, I wasn't lying. All right. So, I promised to cheer you up, um,
with
because,
annexation, which is really weird.
well, I think annexation is amusing, because it's not going to happen.
I don't I see this is where the anxiety kicks in. I don't know. I feel like over a series of events in the last few years that I'm not sure what we thought would never happen will not happen now.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Um,
Well, as a recovering Russia person, from a distant past, I watched many other current Russian experts be very convinced that Russia would not invade Ukraine because why would it need to? It had already what it wanted. What would be the point of this? And yet, that happened.
hmm. All right. So let's talk about what the scenario would be. This was not the direction I thought this show was going to go. I thought I was going to tell jokes and cheer you up.
You
But
can tell jokes and cheer me up. I,
all
I
right,
just,
well,
Greenland introduced that
I
back
no, no,
into my
no.
head.
We follow the direction the show naturally wants to go, and if you want to play out this doom scroll, we're going to play it out. Um, and you see, you're laughing. So
It's an uncomfortable laugh. You
yeah,
you
that's
do know
okay.
that.
I uncomfortable laugh is exactly the vibe we're going for. Um, I think if everybody who we could make uncomfortably laugh. Speaking of which, it is a shoebill shirt day, and
Oh,
shoebills are remind me later to tell you the uncomfortable laugh parenting style of the shoebill, which is a great note on which to end the show because it's positively Roman in its qualities. Um, all right, let's play it out. How Donald Trump takes office 10 days from now, fresh from his criminal sentence, 34 felonies, and he decides that the 35th felony is going to be the annexation of Canada.
I don't think he'll
And
go for us first.
okay, it's 2 years in now, and
Well,
Canada's on
he's
his.
gonna go for Greenland first. It's the easier picking.
Okay, so what's the mechanism? You call up the Prime Minister of Denmark and you say, we want it?
No, I don't
You
think he would do
declare
that.
war on a NATO ally? How does it
Yeah, well,
work?
that's a question. And then what happens afterwards? So there's already a base there, right? Are there troops?
I don't, I mean, it's a huge territory. If there are a small number of U.S. personnel there. Um, I don't
Like
like
50,000 people?
it's only 50,000 people in the entire landmass, and the landmass is like, you know, substantially bigger than Ontario and Quebec combined. Like, what's the so let's say we claim it.
Yeah, I think it's just that. I think it'll be it's ours now.
Yeah, and what
Like an
okay, so
Eddie Izzard flag planting thing.
so let's say Denmark says no, it's not. Um, are we gonna then send troops to Copenhagen or to uh, Greenland?
Greenland, not Copenhagen,
Not
because
Copenhagen.
you're just trying to defend.
We're gonna stay
Yeah.
allies and just fight
Well,
over. It'll be
I don't
like
know
Brit.
about that. I think it'd be like how far will Europe go in the face of America doing something? Like,
And what does Canada do if the United States and Denmark are fighting over Greenland? I mean, you
um,
guys got that big Ellesmere Island thing.
I was gonna say, I think it depends on who's in power, which, as per our last show, we don't know who's there. And then I suspect, in a good old fashioned Canadian way, it's a stern statement. Don't do that, please.
All right. So, we still, by
Then
the way, have zero
what do
people.
you want to do? Do you want to like go and put something out there on Blue Sky or something? And
Um, no, I put something out there last night. I even said last night how many people are gonna. So yeah, if you put something out on Blue Sky with the appropriate link, but not the link I gave you for crying out loud.
no, of
Um,
course not. I'm trying to
uh,
see where you posted this. If I can't find it,
it's in Dog Shirt Daily.
oh, it's
Um,
in Dog Shirt Daily.
yeah, that's
Okay,
my means of communication
right.
with the people. Um,
You'll have to do some talking while I go digging.
yeah, so okay, look, I'm still confused about the mechanism. So in traditional imperialism,
Right.
you
That's the
go
problem here. Traditionally, I don't think we can think traditionally. We have to think in
you have to
really
think in like real.
nonsensical ways.
Okay, so let's game it out on behalf of the Trump administration, which clearly has not doesn't exist yet and clearly hasn't given this enough thought. So let's think, how do you annex a large landmass with almost no people, um, that is nominally controlled by an ally? So obviously, the first thing you do is you tweet about it and say you want to do it because they've already done that, and you announce that you've got your eye on Greenland. And then Denmark waxes offended and hopes you forget about it. And then you don't. So what's your next move?
Well, I think you move more troops onto your base if you haven't done that already. I mean,
Okay,
I
so
don't think
now
it's going to
there's
do it right away. I think, well, hold on. I don't know anymore. See, this is the problem. It's like I want to do this like a logical way in which you want to kind of be strategic and actually acquire the land that you're setting out to acquire. But at the same time, nothing about what seems to be happening is logical. Like coming back to Canada, why say you want us and then say we don't have anything that you want anyway? What would be the point?
right. Well, because you can't control us. You can't control your own thought. Remember, it's he's like you in the doom scrolling internal doom scrolling department. Only he says it all. Everything he's thinking. Imagine like if you're lying in bed, not able to sleep, like spinning out scenarios. Imagine that you're tweeting them all the whole time. That's what Donald Trump is. Plus, he isn't without creativity. I mean, the whole idea of annexing Greenland and Canada is kind of creative in its own weird way. But
Well, I mean, Canada, not so much. You guys have tried it.
yeah, but not for a long time, and not when it was a sovereign country. I mean,
And I still can't find this link.
okay, don't worry about the link is right here. I'll put it for you in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay, so again, unrealistic realities.
um, Yeah. So, all right. Like, let now assume we've got Greenland. We've secured it without having a war with Denmark. By the way, the idea of a U.S. Denmark war is hilarious, and I love it. And to all my Danish friends, um, uh, I will side with you guys when we go to war with you. I will line up with the Danish forces, and I'm on Denmark's side of the uh, Danish American War of 2026. Um, all right, but now we've lost. Wittes has been killed in battle.
Oh, you didn't
The
last
battle of
long.
Aarhus, and and we are. It is now time to turn our attention to the big target, which is Canada, having acquired Greenland with a minimum of blood, other than Wittis's. Um, how do you do it? Let's assume that you guys have Prime Minister Polyev, and we have just acquired, we're chest thumping. Do we go for the Panama Canal Zone next, or do we go for you next?
I think the waters would be tested on us next because you don't have to move troops far away. Um,
Although we've invaded Panama before with some success.
right. They were just talking about that on the news this morning about an annual remembrance for students who were killed trying to plant the flag
I don't remember that,
in
but I was.
1926 or something.
Oh, no, 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 no.
No, I'm just saying it was like
We
they just tried to plant a flag and you guys were all up in arms.
I don't remember. I don't know anything about that, but I do know that when I was in college, we invaded Panama. In I believe 89, 88.
1964 was 21 protesters were killed.
Mm.
Um,
I don't know anything about that. I
right, and
do
then there was
know.
another bombing situation like in 86 or something.
No, but we invaded Panama. Full-fledged
Okay,
invasion took out the
okay, so you
government.
think Panama would be
Uh,
next, not us. I think the
of
overtures would be made to see if Canada, like the elite, would sell itself out and it would be an easy
Okay,
go.
but all right. So let first of all, I just want to say, if we invade and take over Canada, you guys don't become the 51st state. You guys get more than one state.
Are you sure
Um,
about that? Because I kind of feel like right now, the way things are going, we'd get treated like Puerto Rico, which is another reason why Canadians are like, hey, why doesn't Puerto Rico come be a province? We'll give you full citizenship.
yeah, I don't think that's what's going to happen. So
Why do you think it'll be different?
well, first of all, we don't want to inherit the whole Quebec situation, right? In this
You can't just leave
scenario,
Quebec.
why? Quebec wants, says it wants independence anyway. Why don't we come in as the liberators of Quebec and
Okay,
just
this comes
take
back to
all you
why are
Anglos?
we being invaded in the first place? Is it because of our resources? Because Quebec is like one of the bigger generators, I think, of like hydroelectric stuff. You
Right. There's the whole
hydroelectric
well,
energy.
we can Hydro Quebec can be like our East India Tea Company. We'll take we'll take the hydro without the. But we don't want to inherit the whole Quebec mess, do we? We should have
I
Avon
feel
to talk.
I feel like that you should have to, and then Canadians actually should stop talking about it because it is probably the best just desserts if this were to come true.
Yeah, that we have to. All right, but look, I would just say if we were to annex Canada, I think the argument that BC and Quebec and Prince Edward Island are all one state is laughable. We don't have any states like that. So you guys now whether PEI gets to be a state, it's no more laughable than Delaware or Rhode Island, but it would get two senators, and that would upset some people. So like the whole 51st state is not that's not plausible. I think it's at least 8 states, and it may be 10. Um,
See, you're doing this rationally again, in which you think that the the next leadership actually cares about our representation and what it would bring. Like I could see them carving out Saskatchewan and Alberta because like that's like gerrymandering, right? Like it would give them greater support and then reduce the rest of the places that seem a little too liberal. Although we have an advantage if we keep changing names of parties across provinces and the country.
Exactly. You confuse the shit out of us. Um, all right. I'm still thinking about the mechanism here. Donald Trump says we need Anschluss with Canada. What does Pierre Poilievre say? Does he say brotherly nations, to use the Slavic term? Or does he say we will fight them on the land and seas and on the beaches and in the air and we will never surrender? What is Poilievre's reaction to the Anschluss proposal?
So that is an interesting question and hard to say. I think there's lots of things in which we can't really divine much of how he'd move. One is if Canadians really start becoming more vocal and loud about their unwillingness to become American, which at the outset didn't seem clear. And again, it's really hard. It's really hard to tell on social media these days what's real and what isn't. And the one place where I see a lot of posts saying we don't want to become American is on Threads, and I just can't gauge how legit that traffic is or not. So one would be popular response. If Canadians are really loud about not wanting it, then he may swing that way and start saying no. But I think he would try to negotiate some sort of compromise. Like we'd get stuck in some sort of North American Union for sure. Would we have lost our, I don't know, what we might have lost in that deal? But some aspect of sovereignty would be my guess.
What is, from your point of view, this is actually a serious question.
It's
The
all
idea,
serious, Ben.
no, most of it is frivolous because Trump is talking out of his ass and he's not going to do any of this. But I think that what is the optimal relationship between the United States and Canada? One that preserves, one that allows um, these these two countries that cumulatively occupy almost the entire, not the almost the entirety, but the lion's share of a large continent with huge resources, and a shared language and legal culture. What is the optimal relationship in a world in which China has 1.3 billion people, and the Eurasian landmass is largely controlled by China and Russia? Is the optimal relationship the one that currently exists? Is it something more tightly integrated, less tightly integrated? What from a sophisticated Canadian point of view, if you had to design the next 100 years of relationship with the United States, what does it look like?
I mean, so many factors play into that make it really hard to game this out quickly.
Right. No, but
Um,
I think blue skying it is like is an interesting question. I mean, let me put it a little bit differently. For it is not obvious to me at all that the current relationship is the ideal one, for a whole lot of reasons, some of which involve the economic integration, some of which involve relations with Europe, and some of which involve the Arctic, where the U.S. and Canada have very aligned interests relative to Russia and some other
but
countries.
so do some of the other countries that he's threatening to take over parts of.
Yeah. And so my question is like,
Wouldn't we
what
do
if we
better at a
said,
joint defense?
I think there is a lot to say for greater integration of the US and Canada, the one thing on a whole bunch of fronts, the one big problem with it, for example, I don't see why we actually have border controls. Um,
Be-
you know,
You're
like a
right, because it isn't
Schengen,
stopping the bringing in of illegal weapons from the US, which is the biggest source of weapons that are a problem in crime in Canada.
right? I mean, like it's not stopping any problem that exists. But so like why, would a Schengen area be an attractive thing? I mean, it would for a huge number of Canadians who sit in line at the border, to cross in to do their shopping and their, healthcare tourism. It would.
Stop propagating shitty myths.
um, um, I'm just
You're not Turkey. We're not all rushing down there for like cheap plastic surgery or indeed cheap healthcare.
I'm just saying there are all these healthcare facilities that are lined up on our border so that you guys can
For
anyway
wealthy
leave that.
Canadians who may have GoFunded as well to be able to drop a lot more money on healthcare to get it faster or a
Yeah,
treatment that is not available. That to be clear.
yes. Look, I'm just saying. I'm not
I don't
saying we.
want your healthcare system. Most
I
Canadians
don't want our
don't.
healthcare system either, but it does provide some advantages for the
Okay,
wealthy.
let's talk like individuals. Let's not talk at a grand strategic level. I feel like there's too many layers here because, like, on one hand, I think neither of our countries is actually really equipped right now to be able to deal with complex problems the way that it's structured. We just don't have the capacity for collective decision making in the interest of the whole long term. So
Why
both
shouldn't
of our
there be a U.S. Canada Schengen area?
okay, that's what I'm saying. Bigger thing, leave it alone. I don't know why not. I mean, I can think of one practical reason that may be problematic. And again, I'm not dealing with like hard stats here, so I could be completely already manipulated by my crappy media ecosystem. And that is we're already struggling with housing and settlement of people claiming like refugee status and migrants coming in. And a lot of our entry points for that are actually the US. So we're already struggling. If the border just kind of got opened, I think we would really probably have a bigger problem on our hands. Now, that said, would that mean that no, it wouldn't mean that we'd be taking the same policy as you guys are going to be taking on migrants. So that's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, there would be reciprocal concerns on migration because you guys have a much more generous asylum policy than we do, and a lot of immigration that we don't allow, although you don't have a southern border issue. And so you guys would inherit our southern border problem, and we would inherit your um, asylum policy, and neither of those, um, those are from a parochial American or Canadian point of view attractive to keep separate. And yet, from a mass population point of view, being able to treat a US, your regular flights to Washington as a domestic flight, being able to cross the parallel a without a border stop, I mean, it'd just be hugely convenient for a lot of people.
It's
And
actually okay for me. I cross customs over here on the Ottawa side. It's beautiful. It's quick.
yeah, I gotta say, I find it easy when I go visit my family in Vancouver. I find it super easy to cross back into the United States, but getting into Canada is a pain in the neck.
Come to
Um,
Ottawa. Easy.
um, so, okay,
Okay, the
one of,
second thing, guns. We don't want your guns.
yeah,
Now, there's some issues with our gun laws that I think are causing problem, particularly with rural Canadians, farming Canadians, in that they feel that the gun rules have become too stringent. And that may well be the case, especially because it's not necessarily dealing with the gun problem really is, which is like illegal, unregistered weapons coming up from the US. So I think a border that is not managed would increase that problem significantly.
But would it really? Because
Yes.
like how many guns are seized at the border? Like
I
I
don't know.
I've crossed the border into Canada dozens and dozens and dozens of times,
Yeah, but the
and
point
not
is,
once
you're not
has any.
allowed to now. If you opened up the borders and let people bring in anything they wanted because there was no border anymore, there would be
Well,
nothing to stop it. Because
right,
right now you're told you can't. It's illegal. You'll be arrested if it is
but
caught.
you
If
could
you're
still
caught.
it could still be illegal to have an
Yeah,
unregistered gun in Saskatchewan, but it becomes an interior enforcement problem rather than a border enforcement problem. And
great. Because we're already strapped. Like our police
no,
services are
but the point
already
is,
strapped.
if large numbers of guns are not being seized at the border,
Okay, but
then the problem is not a border problem.
hold on. Right now, it is illegal. So if you change that law, people who know that it may not like be, I think that there would be more of an issue with this because if it seems that the border is open, do you think that America, okay, let me ask you this, different way to ask this. How many Americans think about whether there is whether they can, actually, let me try this differently. Can you have a gun in every state in the US?
With by one means or another, yes.
So you could take that gun. Now, the difference is open carry laws, right?
Right, but you don't. Nobody would require that anybody. There, some states don't have open carry laws,
Right, that's what I'm
or
saying.
or
That's kind of the difference between most states is the
right
is
when
the
if I have a gun, in a comparatively unregulated state, and I bring it into a comparatively regulated state, I'm responsible for following the laws of the comparatively regular the so if you drive into DC where guns are, quite regulated and you're behaving like a Texan, you can get yourself arrested real fast. And there's no border control between DC and Virginia where gun laws are quite loose.
right.
And so,
However,
what's the difference between that and driving to Ottawa, except that in Ottawa, you go through a checkpoint on the border where they don't look for guns?
and let me ask a different insensitive question. How are your gun regulations and varying gun regulations across states doing for your gun crime and violence now?
Oh, terribly. But but that's uh but that doesn't seem to me to be a border control problem. That
Yes,
seems to
but
me
we
to,
have tighter gun controls, fewer guns, and a lot less gun violence. Now,
um,
again, it's a correlation. It may not be
no, no, no,
causation.
no. Let's assume it's causation, which I think it is. But my question is, given the fact that when people drive across the border, including with big trucks, looking for guns is not something that the Canadian Border Patrol does.
Right.
It doesn't.
Well, it does,
It
because
does.
it does ask people that.
Yeah, I
Now
mean,
I'm looking this up.
I just question whether the whether the fact of a border presence is what's preventing guns from coming into Canada, or whether what is preventing it, to the extent that anything is preventing it, is that people know that if you get caught with an unlicensed gun in, in Alberta, even, or in, Nova Scotia, you're going to have a liability problem, a criminal liability problem.
First of all, that would be dependent on people actually knowing anything about another place and going there and thinking about it.
By
One.
the way, that's a big problem in in the district when people used to drive in with their licensed guns when guns were essentially completely illegal in the district, and we always had a certain amount of, of enforcement of DC gun laws directed at, totally innocent carry. because, you'd go through a metal detector at like Capitol Hill and people would take off their guns and just put them on the metal detector and they'd get arrested. Um, you know, but I don't really understand the border as a
Okay, so
major
there's a few
function in
things.
that.
One, I doubt that people are actually going to pay attention or care about that, especially if there's no more hurdle that they have to go to. Two, you may get a lot more Americans coming up because many Americans don't have passports and probably haven't been to Canada. And without the border, maybe they just get to cross with their ID. So there's that. The third thing is right now the border does exist. Maybe that is stopping. We don't know or not. I think that the numbers are really low. I think it's like 15,000 guns are seized a year.
Right.
Again, most of the guns that are coming through are probably not coming through official points. We have the longest undefended border in the world.
Right. But that's my point. It's so easy anyway that we're accounting for all your guns. You're talking about a very
Say,
minor.
we're accounting for all of our guns in violent crimes. Most of
Oh,
them.
okay. I mean, it's. I just doubt that border enforcement is a significant factor in what keeps Canadians safe relative to Americans. But let's move on from Schengen area question. Why shouldn't we be a single economic area?
I don't
This
know.
is
I'm not an
this is
economist. I'm not
this
even
is
going to wade
speaking
into guessing on this.
from a Canadian nationalist point of view. But look, I don't understand. We have NAFTA. Everybody hates NAFTA now. I don't. I don't understand why the United States and Canada are not a single trade area and we don't negotiate with other countries, particularly the EU and China, as a unit.
Do you guys, when you go and negotiate with other countries to come up with economic agreements, do all of your states have to be involved?
No, no, no,
Because ours
no.
do. All of our provinces and territories are at the table for that negotiation, which makes it really difficult to get an agreement with Canada.
Yeah, so I think we should like just speak like I think this would be a huge economic boon to both countries if we had a single trade position to deal with North America. Now, let's leave Mexico out of it because for now, I'm actually game for the idea that Mexico should be a part of. But Mexico raises some different issues, which is, you know, um, you know, an economy that is highly based on relatively lower wage labor in the manufacturing sector, right? It raises some other questions. The United States and Canada together have a relatively similar labor profile, a relatively harmonized, not completely harmonized, but relatively harmonized worker safety practices, environmental practices. There's some differences. And there are some regional variations, but you're largely talking about economies that look very similar from the harmonization process would not be difficult. Why are we negotiating with the EU as separate? They have 340 million people or 500 million people in the EU. Why are we negotiating with a giant mega economy separately? That's crazy.
I don't know.
Okay. All right. So those are my two areas where I think
I have
there
another
is,
issue that
yeah.
the border actually does stop, and that's the drug flow up into Canada from the US. You can keep your fentanyl. Apparently, fentanyl production that happens in Canada has led to like small gram amounts coming into the US, not vice versa. So,
So where does Canadian fentanyl come from?
uh, well, again, not an expert on this, but there is a great journalist out of BC who looked at this in terms of organized crime, ports. But I think there's a trade between like Vancouver to Asia and to Australia. Um, but I think it's coming in from the
Hmm.
US rather than produced here. And then what's coming back into the US is actually really small.
Yeah, I mean, most of our fentanyl is not produced here either. And so we're a transit point. Um, for a great deal of that. Although I think meth is produced here, but I think meth is produced in Canada too.
Probably.
Um, so here's
I do
my,
have arguments for the your one or two nationalist viewers who may be watching.
yeah, so,
Not this one, later.
no, right, may eventually watch.
And that would
Go.
be if you were to remove the border, and I'm not sure about your economic union, there would be a flood of Canadians looking for better, well paid jobs in the US and cheaper housing. And you're already complaining about immigrants taking jobs and stuff. And I've heard Canadians being thrown into that. So, one, that's bad. And two, if you're really big on nationalism and anti globalization, swallowing us up doesn't really make a lot of sense. Don't we have the right to our own nationalism and sovereignty?
So, number one, on the first point, I am taking the idea of integration seriously. Um, and, you know, like, I'm saying, what are the parts of it that are actually good ideas? And I do think the idea of the US Canadian border is one that we should both question. I don't know what the answer to it is, but I do think it's a legitimate question why we have a giant undefended border with nominal checkpoints at various spots on it, and why we don't have a little bit more Schengeny response to it. I also think I actually think the economic union should be a no-brainer. I don't think it's a close question. Um, it seems to me that the arguments for the areas that we should remain separate are almost entirely um, issues of culture and nationalism and
Social
those,
well-being, social
yeah,
well-being.
and honestly, Canadian, they're political in character. That Canadians do social safety netty things that we don't have the latitude politically to do here. And I think like that's the argument. It's not really about a set of it's about the practical autonomy of Canadian provinces to be and Canada nationally to be more European in social welfare stuff.
I think that that is accurate, right? Like if we were to break this down again, it's like maintaining things like healthcare, control on guns. Again, that's a debate of how much control, but fine. I still think there needs to be some
Right.
compared to what
There's
the US
more.
has. We don't need more of a fentanyl drug problem. Thank you very much. It's already bad. I think then the fourth thing again is very cultural, and this is probably a facet of Canadians struggling with their own identity and it being kind of based on not being American in many ways. But I think that there has been a continuous fear of being absorbed and culturally repressed by Americans, right? Like we have
Right.
content
It's
laws.
exactly the same fear as the Quebecois have of you guys.
Right. And then they enacted laws to protect themselves, much like the country has enacted laws to
Right.
protect itself. The big difference here is that Quebecois at least have a language barrier that they can maintain that allows them to be culturally separate,
Right.
whereas
Whereas
we
you
don't
guys
have
only
that.
have an accent.
Well, maybe we do, maybe we don't, because how many Canadians come over and take over big newsreader jobs and entertainment, and most of you don't even seem to recognize that it's a Canadian.
Yeah, but that's just because they drop the ooh sound,
Why do I have to constantly tell everybody I'm Canadian? Because they think I'm American.
because they don't understand to listen to when you say the word about.
Wow, you said you'd cheer me up. We have 15 minutes to go.
if, look, I mean, it's the dead giveaway in all Eastern Canadians is just the word about.
I'm not even going to say it now.
I love that for you. I've purged the word aboot from your vocabulary.
There's a
Um,
deer in my backyard. See, I don't want to give that up.
I almost hit a deer on the way home from the cabin in the woods yesterday. You wouldn't have to give that up. They're pests here. Um,
Yeah, but I might be told that I'd have to move because there's a barrier now with the border. It's hard to bring me in.
you might be told that you have to shoot it with the gun that you're required to have. Um, all right, I want to talk about one other aspect of um, integration that um, I think would be a substantial barrier, and that nobody talks about, which is that in important areas, you guys actually have a completely independent foreign policy. And
We're a sovereign nation.
yes, right. But, like, for example, a whole lot of years of relations with Cuba while we were embargoing Cuba. Um,
Right.
and, um, and that is something that, um, in most areas, foreign policy is pretty aligned. Um, but there are these areas where it's not, and where Canada rightly insists on its own um, authority to make its own policies. And, you know, when you talk about absorption, you have to harmonize those foreign policies. And the assumption when Trump says absorption is always that Canada is absorbed into US policy, not that US policy would change in a Canadian direction. And I think there are certain foreign policy areas where that's actually not a good assumption.
Oh, I don't think there's any version of this in the planet in which you guys adopt any of our thinking or ways. That's the problem.
Well, so let me ask uh,
I mean, that's the
what's going
problem
to
from my Canadian perspective.
right. Let me ask what's going to sound like a fantastical question. All right. What if leave us out, let's use a very neutral verb. So it's not imperialistic. What if the countries united on the basis that there are 50 US states and 50 Canadian and 10 Canadian provinces, and we're all going to, whether the rule will be, Canadian style ridings and or U.S. bicameralism. Let's leave aside, but all will be equal.
You forgot about the whole actual, governmental system being completely different.
I'm saying let's waive that. Wyoming, PEI have equal status in the Union. Whether the Union is on the basis of the Canadian Constitution or the U.S. Constitution or some new hybrid constitution.
Not going to come our way.
No, but leave it aside. All right, if you want to imagine it as 10 new states in the United States, or if you want to imagine it as, United States of Canada, based on the Canadian system, however you want to imagine it, it's a genuinely equal arrangement in which Canadian provinces are not disadvantaged in representation relative to US states. Why is that? So all the cultural stuff you guys lose on because we have 10 times the population. But on the representational side, why is there not confidence that you guys would pull the United States in your direction rather than the other way on the political side? We're an evenly divided country. You would give 10% more population and 120, 150% more landmass to the side that's more Canadian in American politics. Why is there so little confidence of that?
Can I ask a question, though?
Yeah.
The way your system's structured, right? It's based on population?
Well, it's based on both the fact of states. All states get 2 senators, even
Oh, yeah.
absurdly tiny ones like Rhode Island and PEI. And then um, uh, uh, single member districts based on apportionment based on population for the House of Representatives. So Canada would actually do super well in, because you have these.
You're
You,
also assuming that all of Canada just goes the same way all the time and agrees on everything.
right. But for example, maritime Canada, like Newfoundland, would be really, really well represented in the U.S. Senate. Um, you
I wonder
take
if Newfoundland would
Newfoundland.
make an appeal to Ireland to take them back. I mean, if I were Newfoundland, that's what I'd do. I'd be like,
I
hey,
mean,
Ireland, got a good
the
deal for you. I got some offshore oil.
the states, the Canadian provinces that would get screwed in a U.S. merger are like the ones with big cities.
Like the one in
Ottawa,
which I reside.
Ottawa would get screwed. What's the
I just
population of Ottawa?
like a million with the greater Ottawa area. The country's
No, no,
only
no,
got
no.
like,
Of the province
oh, I don't
of
know.
Ontario.
I don't know off the top of my head. The entire country's only 40 million and Ontario is the most populous.
Right. So I think Ontario could end up being sort of Californiaized in the sense that it's a huge population with two senators, right? That
15
would
million, nearly
right.
16.
So that would be like,
It's not
you
even
know,
like New York.
yeah, I mean it would have an underrepresentation problem. But,
I just don't see how
New
40 million people
Brunswick.
suddenly changes the shape or culture of the US. I think it's the thing that we've been like struggling against and we haven't even been absorbed for, our entire existence as a nation.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, the thing that's, I think, the core of it. I don't think any of the practical stuff matters this much. I think the cultural identity thing is the whole game.
Except for the ones that I mentioned. I think that those three things are like really big sticking points.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know that. I mean, I believe that they are in Canadian
Yeah, in Canadian
consciousness.
minds.
In Canadian consciousness. I just think, as a practical matter, not a single gun is going to get into Canada under a, the regime that we're talking about that doesn't get in anyway.
I
Um,
don't know. I don't know. Now I really feel like I want to get people who specialize in this. We should do that. We should get people who specialize in like gun ownership and movement of guns transnationally.
all right, let's do it.
I'll
We're
have to find somebody now.
taking
The
Canadian absorption seriously,
this
not
is this is
literally.
where this is where the rubber hits the road, where we come up with shows because we were left alone. I'm like, okay, so fine, gun traffic is one that I can't answer. What else was there? And I also just have to add, and this will make that Fox News show host that was really pissy with Doug Ford the other day more angry, is that it's like a visceral reaction. Like I want to
Right.
just stay Canadian. And I'm going to add that growing up, I was not very patriotic. I didn't really feel that level that the Americans feel until I went out in the world and was constantly asked if I was American. And then it increased significantly after your incoming president decided he was going to try to make us American. And now I really, really want to just stay Canadian.
See, but that, I think, is the core of it, right? Is cultural identity. And cultural includes cultural political. But I don't think it's, at the end of the day, I think Canadians are kidding themselves that it's about you know like, I think the social welfare stuff is very real. Like, the relationship with government is, but I don't think the practical, like, people try to bring it down to the level of guns or fentanyl or migration policies, and I don't think it's about that.
I think those three
I
things
think
are
it's
big,
about
but I also
you
think
go it's about all these Canadian backpackers who put the little maple leaf on their backpacks to show they're not Americans.
Americans do that to get better treatment.
Yes, we do. All right. Well, I love this no audience show thing. Maybe we should just this is getting back to the like very original concept of in lieu of fun, where Kate and I would just get a drink at 5 o'clock every day during the pandemic, and sometimes people would show up, and sometimes they wouldn't.
This definitely felt in lieu of fun.
But hey, it was a really good conversation, though. We
I
did.
don't know if there were any answers, but I think we've got some ideas of people we need to suss out to keep talking about it.
I want to talk about the economic union question further, as well. The why the United States and Canada, and I think we need a Canadian uh, economist on that um, because it has to be somebody who can be sophisticated about the provincial differences versus the
Right.
state differences. Um, but I don't understand why, NAFTA preserved all of these things that made the borders important. And so it seemed to me you got all the economic dislocation of a free trade agreement between both countries and Mexico, and none of the benefit of negotiating as a bloc. Um, and I don't know. There's something about that I find. I want all the Canadian candies. You guys have all these different candies. I was texting with Ev the other day because we have this influencer that we follow who's British and she tries American snacks. And
There's an Irish guy who does this too.
people send her American junk food and she tries it and it's very fun. And um and she was trying Ruffles
Uh-huh.
and
We have a lot of chip
yeah,
flavors.
and Ev was saying that she hadn't tried the what was it, the all loaded,
All dressed
um all dressed, which is a flavor that doesn't exist in the United States,
anywhere.
uh
It's
anywhere.
just
and,
here. I think
and
it's along
I
with ketchup
want it.
chips, but I think you have them now.
I want that. And I don't understand why there are, why we don't have like true economic um, integration. Like why the products are different when you go to Canada.
It's so weird coming down to the US because like you go into like a drugstore and like it kind of like a CVS looks like a Shoppers Drug Mart. There's a lot of similarities, but when you start to dig into like vitamins, all the vitamins are different. They're
right.
just they're just not the same. They're slightly off. I find it really discombobulating. Like it's so familiar. It's uncanny. It's uncanny valley. It's too close to home and not different enough.
Right. So that's the thing. Um I want Canadian products. I want and I want, and I don't just like give me the and but here's the thing. We have so many products that have French on them. Um but yet they're different from the Canadian products.
Okay, I've got a question though. Do you really think that producers in Canada would be able to survive and not be taken over by bigger brands in the US? The reason there may still exist diversity is because we have that border and we are not completely integrated economically. Think about that.
I think just as you took over American comedy, Canadians would do just fine in an integrated market. And I think I think um, the the Canadian, pardon me, inferiority complex is um, is almost entirely bullshit. And in fact, when Canada and the United States compete, Canadians do very well in it in the competition. And the the instinct that um, you know, like I actually think that that's mostly nonsense.
Do you know
Um,
what our self effacement gave us, though?
yeah, it
What?
gave it gave you the ability to be outsiders while playing an insider game, or
No.
insiders while playing an outsider game.
Consider this. America and Canada are siblings. Who's liked better?
There's no question that you guys are liked better. There's also no question that you guys benefit from the comparison. And look, we like you better than we like ourselves. I mean,
You don't even
like,
know us.
everybody likes Canada, including us. You know, I don't know. All right, guys. We are going to wrap up. We're going to be back on Monday. We're going to be talking about Sudan. Speaking of countries that are not benefiting from anybody's current policy, though the country with the word united in it, that in its name, that is fucking Sudan, is the United Arab Emirates, not the United States. We're going to talk all about that with Holly Berkeley Fletcher on Monday. We will see you then. Maybe we'll even have an audience. Ciao.